the wrestling people live in such a bubble that they don't realize that there was a .com crash, that AOL came in, took over Time Warner, that a $73 stock dropped to $15.
Who Killed WCW is a 4-part Vice docuseries following the downfall of WCW during the Monday Night Wars. While it has a heavy focus on the major creative players within the company from 1996 to 2001, throughout the first 3 episodes, the series mostly ignores the levers of power behind the scenes. The focus of the series is almost entirely on wrestling, while omitting the actual thing that led to the downfall of the company. Not much time is spent on showing the viewer what Time Warner was like as a company and the mistakes it would make. Only a brief mention here and there, such as Time Warner never wanted wrestling in the first place, and that execs made it harder for Eric Bischoff. But that undersells how much antagonism Bischoff dealt with from Turner execs. According to Kevin Nash in his 2007 RF Video shoot interview, WCW was never set up to succeed. Eric, since day one, has been fighting Turner, the Time Warner people. The only reason Eric got that money and that spot was because they were sure it would fail against Vince, and they could finally get rid of pro wrestling. You may be thinking, no, that's not true. It's because WWF kicked their butts in the Monday Night Wars, causing WCW to lose so much money. What we can see from the past and present, this idea doesn't hold water. WCW's ratings during the Monday Night Wars following July 7th, 1996, when the NWO was formed at Bash at the Beach, wasn't all that different from WCW's ratings from 1999 and 2000. In the second half of 1996, you were seeing a lot of low to mid 3-point ratings compared to WWF's mid to low 2s. By 1999 and 2000, WWF was pulling in high 5s, 6s, and even 7s, while WCW was only pulling in low to mid 3s. It wasn't that WCW fell off after being ahead for 83 straight weeks. It was that WWF exploded into the mainstream. A Variety article from October 31st, 2000 highlights how valuable wrestling was to cable networks. WWF leaving USA for TNN hurt USA severely. Despite WWF's move to TNN, TNT still edged it out. So even in the worst days of WCW, Monday Nitro was an important part in driving ratings and keeping TNT above other networks. From the same article, we can see that TBS still benefited from WCW Thunder, despite it lacking as a quality product. Towards the end of Thunder's run, it became the anchor of the I Watch Wednesdays programming for the channel. They say history rhymes, and you can't help but think of Warner Discovery here. In 2024, they have a falling stock after a big merger, mismanagement of popular IP, and are destroying their top cable show on TNT. Inside the NBA is a cornerstone of NBA coverage, highly rated and beloved by fans and critics. Yet Warner Discovery doesn't want to pay up for the NBA rights in the newest TV deal. NBA games are a huge ratings draw. They're a major reason people still have cable. Warner Discovery is more than happy to see their panel leave or retire. In both instances, claims of cost will be used in order to justify these choices, despite the fact that Warner in both cases did much worse in other aspects of their media ventures. The reality is they just don't see how valuable certain products are for their brand and channel. Back in 2000, AOL, America Online, completed a gigantic merger with Time Warner. At the time, it was a revolutionary moment that would pair a massive juggernaut in media with AOL's 30 million internet subscribers. AOL acquired Time Warner for a whopping $165 billion, making the entire company at one time worth $350 billion. Future plans for the newly formed company included hosting Time Warner's content on AOL. It was seen as an evolution in media. Despite big dreams, the internet bubble would burst a year later, and with that, the hopes of what this mega corporation could do. Once the bubble burst, WCW was as good as dead. The crash led to a fire sale that had AOL Time Warner sell off everything and anything they could. In another part of Kevin Nash's 2007 shoot interview, he picks up on this point.
That AOL sold everything they could. I mean, they sold the Braves, the Hawks, they sold everything. But I booked WCW to its death. I personally did it.
Brad Siegel was a Turner exec who had a whole list of programming he was overseeing. WCW shows were one of them, and he hated it. Ted Turner's love of pro wrestling was no longer protecting the product after the merger. So when everything came crashing down for the mega corporation, it was easy for Siegel to turn around and sell the media rights. WCW was a product that was losing money, but it wasn't hopeless. It just needed a bit of cost-cutting measures. But given their bloated roster, nobody would have noticed. WCW was still popular. Going back to the ratings, WCW was not in the toilet. It just didn't explode the same way WWF did. WCW could have repackaged, sized down, and became something better. We need to visualize these ratings to really show that WCW didn't drop in the toilet like everyone says. Notice how some of these are very close to each other? Well, these ratings aren't weeks or months apart, they're years apart. 1997 versus 1999, 1998 versus 2000. This is after numerous bad feuds, pay-per-views, and milking WCW for as many hours of TV as possible. WCW just didn't fit into the branding of TNT. Let's go back to the NBA TV rights with Warner Discovery, because it's so easy to see that this is a consistent line of thinking over 2 decades later. That corporations have execs who dislike content and therefore are willing to bank on their genius of cutting costs and eliminating programming, boosting stock performance. But why mess with something that is working? And that is the same issue they had back when WCW was around. Why mess with this? You saw how bad TV has gotten, and it's still pulling in ratings. By 2000, you could have been wise enough to see that teens and young adults buy stuff, and you could find the ad buys. WWE did. Turner Broadcasting never saw the value in pay-per-views. As the years went on, their buy rates plummeted. That was extra cash that could have kept them from burning money. 1999 was the last gasp for WCW in terms of good pay-per-view numbers. Mayhem took place in November and had 200,000 buys, with a buy rate comparable to their 1996 November pay-per-view, World War III. Even in a year like 1999, where WCW was seen as presenting a declining product, WCW managed to sell. They had an average of 240,000 buys for each of their 12 pay-per-views. The problem wasn't really WCW, despite its dysfunction. The disdain for WCW by Turner execs caused its downfall. During AOL Time Warner's rapid fire sale, Siegel would sell off the rights to WCW's video library, IP, and trade name for a measly $2.5 million. Now keep in mind they still had to pay people out. They weren't having Vince McMahon absorb any of that debt. Siegel even had a deal led by Eric Bischoff and Fusion that would be worth $48.3 million. The Fusion offer included a $5 million deposit, so even if the deal collapsed, Turner would have picked up double what they would have gotten from Vince. Moreover, Fusion had agreed to take over every contract, relieving AOL Time Warner of more than $15 million in salary payouts. Some people have mentioned that the WWF exec leading the deal, Stu Snyder, was friends with Siegel and a former Turner exec himself. They claim the deal with Bischoff was purposely squashed to sell directly to WWE. Former WCW employee Bob Ryder, when interviewed, broke down how he saw the events leading up to the deal. While Fusion was still at the negotiating table and negotiating in good faith, Siegel was contacting his friend Stu Snyder at the WWF to figure out what needed to be done to make sure the WWF got the deal. Siegel sabotaged his own company by convincing Kellner to cancel the shows. He did that after he made a call to Stu Snyder and found out the only way he could make a deal with the WWF was to cancel the shows. Once the shows were canceled, that narrowed down the potential buyers to one. While I'm not sure that Siegel intended to help a friend, there were numerous reports of a deal coming together for Bischoff to purchase WCW.
So the decision was made once we had a signed letter of intent, once we knew that that due diligence period was going to actually begin. We felt that it was important that we be honest with the public and we frame the news and the information accurately.
Bischoff was even interviewed about the deal in World of Wrestling's April 2001 article. Of course, part of that relied on Turner continuing to air WCW. but it would have been off their books. In reference to Bischoff's business partner, he was asked this question. Did you ever say to him, WCW is projected to lose $80 million. Why would you want to buy the company? No, he's a smart guy. He knew. We talked right off the bat why things were going wrong. We knew what needed to be done and how to turn it around. According to a tweet by Dave Meltzer, this was how 1998 through 2000 broke down for WCW. WCW in 1998, $30 million in profits. WCW in 1999, $9 million in losses, all in the last 6 months, as the first 6 months were profitable. WCW in 2000, $62.3 million in losses, on track for $80 million, but they did a ton of cost cutting. When we discuss WCW losing money, it's always made out to be like they were burning so much money that it would destroy Turner. But we see media companies lose much more money. AOL Time Warner's value wasn't really tied to WCW. It's important to look at other Warner media ventures at the time and how they fared. When WCW was on the rise in 1997 and making money hand over fist, Warner put out the movie The Postman, which was one of the biggest box office bombs, losing $70 million. In 2000, when WCW was on track to lose $80 million, Warner released the movie Battlefield Earth. It's a movie that's got 3% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 2.7 out of 10 on IMDb, and only made $29.7 million at the box office worldwide, another box office failure. There was another movie in 2000 that went straight to VHS called The In Crowd. It lost $8 million off a $15 million budget. So just from a quick glance at 3 projects Warner was putting out shows duds losing at least $120 million in total, with nothing to build off of to make a profit out of it. This is not even mentioning any marketing money they lost on these 3 projects. Between these 3 projects, they lost about triple what WCW did in 3 years. I believe Siegel sold it to Vince and the WWF because it was the only way to truly kill WCW. They already decided to cancel Monday Nitro. They could have sold it for more money, but selling it to WWF prevented WCW from ever making them look foolish if they turned things around. History is written by the winners, and part of WWE's depiction of the Monday Night Wars is that WWE's success was at the expense of WCW. This just isn't true. It just happened that WWE broke into mainstream pop culture. Despite the finger poke of doom, losing their undercard talent, and Vince Russo nonsense, they were still popular. WCW's lows weren't truly lows. We've seen some bad wrestling on TV throughout the 2000s and 2010s, yet the product survived. When describing his vision for the new WCW, Eric Bischoff billed it as running out of Vegas at the Hard Rock Cafe Arena or MGM Grand. These would act as a weekly location, saving travel for big events and rebuilding from the ground up. Starting with a big kickoff pay-per-view called The Big Bang. Think of all the talent that existed in WCW as well as talent from ECW. Not to mention talent that would come into the business and make names for themselves at places like ROH and TNA. WCW had branding and potential to regroup and live to fight another day. While the 4th episode of the Vice series will certainly cover a lot of this, it seems that the question of who killed WCW has always been too centered on wrestling, rather than the corporate mismanagement. AOL Time Warner killed WCW and set back the wrestling business. Wrestling's grip on pop culture didn't have to die down, especially when we see the expansion of the product globally today. We're still talking about WCW almost 25 years later,